This is what you need to know about Jason Ayto's plan to change things up at Brighton Hove Albion. Welcome to Seagulls Central. My name is Adam MacDonald and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much for clicking on this video. As I always say, if you find yourself coming back to the channel or you're a new person watching this channel and you're a massive Brighton fan and you haven't done this already, hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on and you'll never miss this best, the fastest, the most in-depth reaction to all Brighton Hove Albion content out there. And thank you very much for coming to this. We're going to get into it today. We're going to talk about Brighton's fairly new now. It's probably been the best part of a month since Jason Ayto, the new sporting director, was appointed to the football club. Around a month since Brighton, probably just over a month now, since Brighton departed with David Weir, who was at the club for probably the best part of 5-6 years, and then technical director for around 2 or 3 years. Bringing in a whole new technical setup at the top end of Brighton Hove Albion, creating a brand new role in terms of sporting director, promoting Mike Cave, I was going to say Nick Cave there, Mike Cave, to technical director, which was David Weir's role. Mike Cave's been promoted to David Weir's role. However, we've brought in Jason Ayto almost above that role in a brand new role, sporting director. And he's given his first interview, his first proper long-form interview, or at least the first interview that we've all kind of as fans been able to see. There might have been some other ones that, you know, we aren't privy to. Maybe there was ones, I can't even think where they would be. But do you know what I mean? The first public proper interview that we've been able to see, it's with Sky Sports News, I think it was. And it's a kind of good 5-10 minute interview where he's talking around kind of his real background, his real history, where he's come from. The clubs he's been at before, his time at Arsenal, crucially, that was a big topic of conversation. And kind of how he came to get this role and what he's planning to do at Brighton, what he wants to do at Brighton, what he believes the opportunity is at Brighton. And I suppose it was a good example and a good opportunity for him to set his vision out, to set his stall out in terms of what he thinks is possible at Brighton and what he wants to do, how he wants to make his mark at the club. Now, my first takings of this interview is that he seems like a very personable, likeable, interesting man. He seems clearly a very talented operator. But I think in terms of the interview, he's got a bit of personality. He smiles. You know, I know that sounds like the basic things, but I think in terms of being a communicator and someone leading your football club, it's nice to see someone who can speak well, can come across well, clearly has a bit of a story to tell as well. I think he's got all of that. A very young man, you know, for the role that he's in, a sporting director of a Premier League football club and one of the football clubs at the cutting edge of kind of modern, you know, football. It's a fantastic job for him and it's very impressive. And obviously, you know, there'll be much more depth to the levels of impressiveness that, you know, we don't even see in this interview. But I thought he came across very well. But when you look at him, he looks young and he comes across young. Like, even though he speaks, he sounds young. Not in terms of what he's saying, just like he sounds youthful. That is a compliment to him. And so it's interesting. It's obviously very, very impressive. And he's speaking for around 10-15 minutes or so with Patrick Davison from Sky Sports, and they really dig into everything about him. So I've written a few notes here, and I'll kind of get into each of them. I've written kind of 4 or 5 points to kind of talk a bit more widely and kind of get into kind of what he says and what he thinks his plan is. So he talked about how he's, one of the takeaways I've really taken from this is that he is a proven developer of very smart recruitment systems. Obviously, he speaks about his work in the USA. He speaks about his work at Norwich City. But actually at Arsenal, where he was for the best part of kind of 12 years or so, maybe a little bit longer even, he was a part of kind of revolutionising, I think, from the way he spoke there, their recruitment model. It took it from, or was at least very strongly part of the process that took it from kind of an eye test, original kind of scouting methods that you'd see in terms of football clubs, moving it into a kind of modernised version, you know, using data to support that. He was part of bringing in signings to that football club, players like Gabriel Martinelli, who they bought for the best part of £1 million, turning him round into a player who they can sell for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times that price. And I think what I found is that he clearly is a person who aligns with Brighton's values in terms of the way, you know, the way he approaches recruitment. He's someone who has proven that he can work with data. He's proven that he understands how, you know, Brighton's model works in the sense that You buy players for cheap, ones with value, ones with potential. And I think his opportunity now is to be able to drive Brighton's recruitment into a new era where maybe we're moving from an era where it's not necessarily about buying the £1 or £2 million players anymore, but it's maybe around spending money maybe 10, 20 times that value at 10, 20 million quid and turning those into £100 million players. I think also he seems like someone who is obsessed with data. In the interview, he talked about how there was a moment, I think this was when he was at Arsenal, I think it might have been when he was at Norwich actually, he said, where he mapped every single Premier League player's birthplace in order to try and find the hotspots in the Premier League in terms of where talent is coming from. And I found it interesting the way he made the joke that, this was in the era before ChatGPT, before AI, before you could use models to kind of support you with these things. So it literally was going through every single player and working out where they were born. And I think what that speaks to is he's clearly someone who is very comfortable with data and understood early on, even maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the importance of data, and not just data in the kind of broad brushstroke term, which no one quite understands, but he clearly has been working in that industry of using data in football to kind of support his work. He speaks about Tony Bloom's model. He calls it here the best coverage in the world, the setup that Tony Bloom uses through Jamestown Analytics and obviously Star Lizard. But this is a crucial thing he says in the interview, and I think this is what stood out to me when he was talking about recruitment. So obviously we've got that data-driven side to him, which, the whole kind of tracking all these players and whether one shows his obsession, shows his comfortability in that role. But also he speaks around the kind of culture and personality of signings that you want to make. And he says, the person matters as much as the player. And I think that's a really good fit, isn't it? When you think about Brighton's kind of policy around no egos, around signing the right characters. I think we've seen it many times in the past where Brighton have avoided signing certain players because of the reports around their personality. So I think he's very, very much a good fit in that sense. I also think another thing he spoke around, he was asked around Arsenal's January transfer window in January 2025 just gone, where they kind of quote unquote failed to sign a striker. And Patrick Davison kind of said to him, look, was not signing a striker, was not signing the right player there, almost just as important as kind of signing someone who, you would have brought in and it might have been wrong, but it was just to get a player in, just to get a striker into it, maybe appease the media, appease the fans, be seen like you're doing something. And what he said, his view, interestingly, he said recruitment is about risk management and it's not just about reaction. So it's not about, buying players because you think, oh my God, everyone's saying we need one. We're desperately short up front. We need to buy one. It's actually working out what's your risk factors here? Where's your matrix and how are things going to work? Are we going to overspend on a player because we can't get the one we want because they're not available till the summer? So we overspend on a player we don't quite need, but it just fills the gap. I think that what that shows is that he clearly aligns with Brighton's model. He said in the January transfer window, I've got it here, he said he refused to make those panic January signings because they were chasing the title, because they didn't want to make the wrong decision. And I do think that same restraint, that same understanding around getting the right player is very, very much in line with Brighton's kind of steady model of growth, isn't it? You've seen plenty of times where Brighton have been outpriced from a player and they've walked away, or they've got into advanced stages and they've maybe done personality checks and they've walked away. He spoke about the planning cycles for recruitment as well, saying around many of the players you want to sign are kind of 12 months, 24 months down the line in terms of planning. You think about that in terms of the players Brighton have signed. Olivier Biscagli, tracking him for the best part of kind of a year, 18 months. Going on, I think this would have been an interesting reason as to why they appointed him. And I do think, as well as his data kind of understanding, I also think this next point would have been an interesting, maybe key point in why Barber and Bloom decided to appoint him. And he kind of was speaking around his real depth of understanding in terms of how smaller clubs need to operate in terms of competing with or even sometimes out-competing the bigger clubs. He talked about the time he spent in the USA when he was actually kind of very, very early on in his time starting out in football. He said he started out working in marketing and PR and then didn't really like it, kind of tried to move in. He went out to America on, I think it was like a kind of on a industry placement kind of thing. And he said that was the kind of that was the space, that was the era that kind of taught him how to use analytics, how to work within the structures of football. But he says that was a kind of key moment where he realised how data, how strategy, how recruitment, how personality and culture means you can build an organisation that means you can outcompete with the big sides. And he spoke about that understanding. I think that's so crucial to the way Brighton are run, is it's not just about coming into the Premier League and trying to stay up and buy the right players to stay up. It's around doing things a little bit differently, understanding that Brighton don't have the opportunity to spend as much money as anyone else. He actually used the phrase, they never have and they never will. We never will be able to spend the money that other clubs can, which is right. And, it's that understanding that you need to do things a little bit differently. I think, he's obviously had a varied career. He's been in English football. He's gone out to America. And I think he understands the competitive edge that goes on at Brighton and the way that they want to operate. He says here Brighton's a club of opportunity. He says that Brighton, I thought this was an interesting point. He spoke around how Brighton are a club who can kind of be quicker and braver in terms of the signings they make, which I thought is, I suppose it's one of those things you kind of know, but you don't really think about it like that. I've never really thought about it in those terms as much. Brighton, in a way, you often see them pipping these big teams to players because they can afford to. Brighton essentially almost have to take those risks on players that maybe other teams can, while Man United might be dithering, or Arsenal might be dithering over whether to sign a player, whether it's a bit of a risk, whether they'll be ready to kind of come in and do what they need to do for them. Brighton are quick, Brighton get in there. Brighton see opportunity. They're a little bit braver. For example, he spoke about the Carlos Baleba move, going and signing him for the best part of 20, 25, 30 million quid after playing only something like 8 starts in his professional career at that point. So, yeah, I think he clearly understands how Brighton need to operate, how Brighton do operate. And again, he spoke about here how the club is competitive, reflecting what we all love about the club. The fact that Tony Bloom is such a special character in terms of creating that environment for the fans. And I think also, finally, that kind of ambition he spoke about here, he was keen not to kind of speak too much around kind of the past. He seemed like he knew a lot about Brighton's story. I suspect he's probably seen something like Stand or Fall, that movie that's just come out. It seems like he mentioned a couple of times the kind of understanding around where Brighton have come from and how actually it's okay for the fans to, just because Brighton have come from a history kind of 15, 20, 25 years ago where things were really rough, it doesn't mean that Brighton fans now sit on their hands and rest on their laurels and just are fine with kind of an okay season. It's good, it's right, it's what we want, it's what Tony Bloom does, is to really expect big things and try and push for big things. He actually said the word Brighton, we want to win trophies. So I do think from what we've seen from him, we can expect a continuation of it. I think he was asked by Patrick Davison, how can you come in? It's quite a tough gig for you to come into a club where Brighton have done things at the cutting edge of football for so long. What are you going to do? How do you take that responsibility? Is that not quite a big task for you to actually come in and change things, or come in and improve things, or make things better, or keep it going? What do you do? And I thought his answer was very strong on that as well. So I do think it's going to be interesting. I wonder whether this will generally kind of mark a kind of pivot in maybe Brighton's recruitment style. You've got to remember as well, and he spoke about this in an interview, it's not just recruitment that Jason Ayto will be operating, it's the academy, the women and girls academy, the women's team, medical, strength and conditioning, all of these things. I imagine logistics as well in terms of pre-season planning and tours and all these kind of things. So that he's got a big remit. I don't sense we will see a massive pivot in the way Brighton operate in this department, particularly in recruitment, but I think maybe in a year's time might be a better opportunity to kind of stock take and think around how things have changed. Clearly Brighton's recruitment in the last maybe 6, 9, 12 months has been a little bit wanting. I think at times we didn't squad build necessarily. I think we focused too much on seeing opportunities in the market and just going and getting those players when we could get them for a good price or when they did become available. And I think that's certainly something you need to do for a club like Brighton. You need to move when the iron's hot. You need to strike when the iron's hot in terms of player recruitment. That's what he spoke about. However, my personal hope would be that he actually tries to build a squad a bit more in a way that we've maybe not seen. I think particularly last season, looking pretty light at the back. I think the season before that we looked pretty light in midfield. And I think hopefully this will be something, now that we've kind of reset the squad this summer and seem to have a little bit more of a balanced squad, hopefully this can be something in the long term that he tries to help us achieve, which is obviously trophies and kind of getting back into Europe on a regular basis, which was obviously what he spoke about. So yeah, let me know what you thought of the interview, and let me know what you think of the comments that I've kind of brought to you today. Do you think he is the right man to take us forward? How do you think things are going to change? Do you think Brighton are in a better position than they were a couple of months ago after the summer transfer window with David Weir in charge? And how do you think things might be different, if at all, in the short term or even between now, and next summer? What do you think? Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, if you've enjoyed this video and you find yourself coming back to the channel and you haven't done it already, please hit the subscribe button and turn your notifications on so you never miss a video. We'll be back probably tomorrow or the day after to talk more about Brighton and all the biggest news stories in the Brighton scene at the moment. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next video, and as always, up the Albion.